Industry is at a really interesting point in its life cycle at the moment. What we're seeing is financial institutions being in possession of a wealth of data and information, and at the same time, they have access to technology which allows them to deliver financial advice in different ways. And this is all happening at the same time that we know that consumers are looking at receiving advice in different ways, moving away, I guess, from the more traditional financial advice model to more piece by piece or event-based financial advice.
Traditionally, in our regulatory and contentious landscape, we saw in 2018 the Royal Commission into Financial Services Misconduct, which focused quite heavily on financial advice misconduct in terms of face-to-face provision of advice. And then following that, a lot of aggressive action toward financial advice companies in terms of misconduct that had been conducted on behalf of advisors. And so now we're entering into a new regulatory landscape that's quite uncharted, and where the regulator is having to deal with these data issues which bring with them privacy concerns, but then also looking at how to supervise and monitor and regulate the new interaction between financial advice being provided to consumers in the digital landscape.
I guess the thing in this jurisdiction is that where targeted marketing or information is provided to customers, and there is a pre-existing relationship with those customers, it's not difficult to then trip up on the personal advice obligations. And unfortunately, those obligations are cumbersome and also costly as a result of the last decade of reform that has occurred. And so what we're seeing is that advice is expensive, and it's also not particularly accessible, which is unfortunate. And it means that providing advice in a digital landscape is quite difficult to navigate.
Particularly when the regulator is showing quite an appetite to stretch further into what it considers to be the provision of personal advice. And so there's a tension between our industry and our commercial entities trying to grapple with the landscape and provide consumers with what they need, and the regulators trying to catch up and work out actually how do they regulate this environment.
Helpfully though, the Morrison government in March of this year released the terms of reference for their quality of advice review. That review will look at a number of things, but it will in particular look at how it can reduce the cost and duplication that exists within this regime. It'll also look at things like the role that superannuation trustees play in the advice world. So that review is well underway, and we're expecting the results to be delivered to the government at the end of this year.
And then, despite there being a change in political parties, where we've got a new Labor government that's replaced the Liberal government, we do anticipate that there'll continue to be a focus on the provision of financial advice, and in particular ensuring the safe provision of personal advice, particularly to vulnerable communities and populations.